Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Hank Johnson, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. So the Texas Democrats, as you know, have fled the states in what they say is an unfair and an unconstitutional move by Republicans there. And now the showdown is spurring into maneuvering similar actions in Democratic states like California, like Missouri. Are we entering an era of tit for tat now? And is this something that you would support at this point for the Democratic Party to do?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Republicans have us on a trajectory to the bottom when it comes to reapportionment and redistricting and political gerrymandering. And so there's no way that Democrats can sit back and allow this to happen when our only response is to engage in this battle to the bottom. So Democratic states are going to have to up their game and redistrict in order to meet this challenge that is really trying to deprive people of their fundamental right to vote. We have no choice but to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, and it is something that Democrats in top positions, going back to the Obama administration, I'm thinking of Eric Holder, strongly opposed to. And also now, unfortunately, according to his own words, he says this is something that Democrats should be doing as well, sort of reversing course on his views. What are you hearing from your constituents, from your Democratic constituents? Is that what they are wanting the party to do?
Well, there's no doubt that my constituents want to see Democrats fight vigorously against all of the chaos, cruelty, and corruption of the Trump administration and its acolytes like Greg Abbott and others down in the Texas MAGA Republican Party who are trying to abuse this system in order to maximize their own power at a time that they know that the American people are not in favor of what they have done. This big, beautiful bill is opposed by 60% of Americans. And as we approach the midterm elections, Donald Trump and his MAGA minions, like Greg Abbott, are trying to stack the deck to make sure that they can elect more Republicans. And that's why Texas is doing what it's doing. And that is exactly why Democrats in states across the country must match what Republicans are doing so that we can preserve and protect this ability of the American people to choose their representatives, not for the politicians to choose who they want to vote for them.
Well, as we heard, Governor Abbott is threatening lawsuits now against these Democratic members that have left the state. President Trump has called them cowards and said the FBI may have to arrest some of them. What are the Democratic implications if, in fact, we do see the FBI and the Justice Department now intervene in what is a state-specific issue?
Yeah, well, it's no doubt that under Donald Trump, we're seeing more militarism throughout the country. And the same thing is coming to Texas. Governor Greg Abbott is really trying to turn Texas into a police state, threatening to enforce laws against legislators that don't even exist, that are not even on the books, and threatening to yank them out of office. And I guess he would put his own folks in there if he were so bold. And I'm not sure that he will not be bold enough to try to insert his people over the democratically elected representatives who've chosen to flee Texas to deprive the Texas MAGA legislature of the quorum that it needs, that it would use to cut the throats of Democrats. So we're not going to be complicit in our own destruction. I support what those Democratic legislators in Texas have done, and that is to leave the state. They're not cowards. They are very courageous, and they're making a tremendous sacrifice for the greater good.
Congressman, this battle is unfolding as we mark the 60-year anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. How do you see the connection between what's going on in Texas right now and the larger national erosion of voting rights that so many are sounding the alarm about?
Yeah, unfortunately, we have a United States Supreme Court which appears to be hell bent on gutting the remainder of the Voting Rights Act. They've already neutered Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and now they're going after Section 2 to make it impossible for individuals to protect their rights, and putting that into the palm of the hand of a politicized Justice Department to file suit on behalf of those who would contend that their voting rights have been violated. And so that would turn precedent on its head. The U.S. Supreme Court appears willing to do that. And MAGA Republicans want to see it done because they know that it benefits them. They know that right-thinking people in this country deserve a right to choose between parties where the deck is not stacked. They need fair districting. And so the way to get that done, by the way, is to come up with a redistricting commission that is nonpartisan. And I think that's something that Eric Holder has been promoting, and I think he's still in favor of that, although he acknowledges that in the present climate, we have no choice but to attack these, what the state of Texas is doing in other states that are democratically controlled.